Kupel, and I will be responding to the claim made that the legalization of marijuana would significantly benefit the United States economy. My opponent made 3 claims, but as he only had time to present on 2, I will be presenting on those 2 also. His first claim was that legalization would decrease enforcement costs, and his majority of his evidence comes from Jeffrey Neuron, who is a prestigious Harvard economist. However, Jeffrey Neuron does have a little bit of a radical side to him. He's for the non-criminalization or the legalization of all illegal drugs, and that's something I don't believe the society is ready for, and it's coming from an area where we really shouldn't be taking evidence from him. Also, in his reports, he leaves out important factors when drawing his conclusions. From the footnotes of his report's budgetary implications of drug prohibition written in 2010, he writes, "This report addresses only the criminal justice costs of enforcing drug prohibition. It does not address any possible changes in prevention, education, or treatment expenses that might accompany legislation." And this is something, if we are realistically looking at whether or not it would benefit the economy, we need to take into account all of these different issues, and he just leaves those out. Also, his evidence states that a whole lot of money, basically millions and billions of dollars, will be saved on enforcement costs, either in arrests and trials and incarceration of prisoners. However, these costs, if saved, may not be applied to the economy. They may be applied to other enforcement costs, whereas if we were to legalize marijuana, we would still need to be enforcing restriction on minors, likely, and also increasing restrictions on driving under the influence. And both of these situations would likely increase after we legalize because of freer access to marijuana. Also, if for some reason this money were saved and not spent on enforcement, why would it be put into the economy when the government can send it pretty much wherever it wants? It will probably get lost in some layer of bureaucracy. In response to his second claim, legalization would generate tax revenue. I would like to say that legalization would diminish the enforcement's ability to track who was selling and who was buying. Basically, legalization makes black market selling of marijuana much easier. Now you don't have to hide, you don't have to sneak around with your product. You can openly sell it and then just not tax it, whereas everyone else has to tax it. Dr. Rosie Pakula, who writes on behalf of the RAND Nonprofit Research Corporation, writes that there is a tremendous profit motive for the existing black market providers to stay in the market, as they can still cover their cost of production and make a nice profit. Basically, they can sell it for cheaper than everyone else and still make a profit, so why would they tax it if they don't have to, if they can get away with it? In a similar situation, in which between Canada and the United States, when Canada increased their tax on cigarettes, they created a huge smuggling problem. Again, Dr. Pakula writes, substantially smaller profit margins caused by a mere $2 per pack price differential on cigarettes between Canada and the United States created such an enormous smuggling problem during the mid-1990s that Canada decided to repeal its tax hike. So if we can't even handle a tax on cigarettes and there's a huge smuggling problem existing in the United States and Canada, what would happen if we legalize marijuana and create the large taxes on it, such as Congress has been talking about, even a $50 tax? It's just not feasible that we would make a profit on that. In addition, if for some reason this tax revenue is received, it again might not be spent on the economy. Any increased tax revenue might be required to put into the medical field. Again, Dr. Pakula writes, a group of RAND researchers conducted a study of marijuana treatment episodes occurring in hospital settings and found that individuals admitted into hospitals with marijuana abuse and dependency as their primary diagnosis have median lengths of stay that are 2 to 3 times longer than those experienced by patients admitted for alcohol, cocaine, or heroin, and therefore result in higher average charges. And she says that this result is very surprising. We don't know what's causing it, and it is a cause for concern. If we legalize marijuana, more people will use it, more people will become dependent on it, and we're going to have increased medical costs for these people staying in hospitals for longer. So in conclusion, I would just like to say that there is not enough evidence, and this is a hasty conclusion to say that it will significantly benefit the economy when there are so many different aspects that we haven't looked at yet.
Right, I like the way that you listed the issues at the beginning. You do kind of make this generic argument about the reputation of the advocate's authority and suggest that perhaps because of the advocate's authority being so caught up in issues related to legalization of all kinds of illicit substances that it might be hard to make inferences based off of the data that is specifically cited here. It's kind of a generic challenge, and it's probably worth making, but I don't know in the long run that it does much to diminish the information that the advocate presents, especially if that information is factually based. In other words, here's how much money we spend trying or arresting or doing any of those kinds of things. That doesn't sound like it's going to be influenced by the person's opinion on other information. It just sounds like that's factual data that happens to be presented by this person who also has these other views. So I don't know that it helps you that much to make that particular challenge. It would, however, maybe be useful later on if, for instance, this information was going to be used, like back to the debate kind of scenario, if there was going to be a further argument and that authority gets quoted again, and this time that what they're being quoted on is rather an inference about what's likely to happen, then I think maybe you've kind of set some groundwork that would be useful for you to make an argument there. I think there's some other arguments that you do make on the economic benefits because of shifts in cost that are good, but they're very speculative at this point, and it shouldn't be hard to come up with some information that suggests that there are those other costs. The very last point that you had, for instance, gives an example of one of those costs, which is the cost of treatment for people who have marijuana dependency. Accidents, highway incidents, business regulations, and you mentioned, for instance, law enforcement things that might be done to make sure that adolescents or minors don't get those crimes, and even the tax enforcement issues deal with costs. But there might also be like social costs that go on, healthcare costs, that kind of thing. So I think you could probably develop that point a little bit more as a way to counterbalance whatever benefit there is. I don't remember that the advocate gave a particular number about how much would be saved, and you kind of assert that there's going to be a substantial loss there. Again, without any number to do a comparison on, I think that's sort of a difficult situation to deal with. Now, the revenue argument I thought was much better developed because you had a nice analogy that you drew here to black markets. You had an illustration where the cost differences justify continuing a black market, which basically undermines the notion that you're going to get substantial tax revenues, because as long as the black market continues to exist, and especially since they've already got the distribution system in place for the users of marijuana, why would anybody bother going to, I don't know, the state marijuana store or wherever it is that it would be distributed legally, and you'd have to show your ID and all those kinds of things, when you've already got your local dealer who's going to sell it to you at a third of the price, that sort of thing. And there's no consequence to you for buying it from that person because it's legal for you to use it. I think that that's a good argument to make. And then you've got the demonstration about how Canada, in essence, had to repeal the taxes that they put in there, and they didn't get any of those benefits. And then you come back, and this is where you got some more of that information about the cost issue, and it seems like that should have been up in that first point. All right, so I like the two arguments that you had there. The first one, I think, could have been developed a little bit more. All right, thank you.